What has happened, everybody? James Hancock here. I'm back to review Next Goal Wins from director Taika Waititi, starring Michael Fassbender, a movie which is actually based on a documentary from 2014, a documentary which I tried really hard to watch before seeing this movie, but it's strangely been evaporated or erased from the internet, maybe as a way of not confusing people ahead of the release of this film. But unless I was willing to buy the goddamn DVD, I couldn't even watch the movie illegally. And so I understand that the documentary is absolutely incredible, but sadly I can't do a fair comparison as was my original plan. So all I can talk about is this particular movie, which I would say is pretty good. And going into this flick, I really hoped it was going to be a return to form for Taika Waititi as a filmmaker, because I feel like his best movies are the kind of quirky, esoteric, just strange, indie, kind of character-driven comedies, or at least lighthearted adventure movies. Movies like Hunt for the Wilder People. I think that's a strong contender still for his best movie he ever made. Boy from 2010 is probably his most personal, but I feel like that is really his sweet spot. And, Thor Ragnarok, I really enjoyed that. Thor Love and Thunder, much less so. And I feel like Thor Love and Thunder greatly reduced his overall fan base, which is a shame, because there was a period there where he suddenly seemed like he was going to be one of those guys who really graduates from the indie scene to making these big giant blockbusters very successfully. And I guess he did direct two giant blockbusters, so mission accomplished. But he was also talking about doing a live-action remake of Akira, a movie which I hope will never happen, because I dislike live-action remakes of anime classics almost as much as I dislike narrative movies being based on successful documentaries. This whole weird kind of subgenre has got a troubled track history or a troubled track record. If you look at something like Dogtown and Z-Boys, really cool documentary about skateboarding in Venice Beach from the late 70s up through the 80s, and then it was made into kind of a terrible movie, The Lords of Dogtown. Or take Man on Wire, the documentary about the guy who was tightrope walking between the two towers of the World Trade Center. And then it got made into that really horrible Robert Zemeckis flick, The Walk, which was just unwatchable. But the original documentary was incredible. But for whatever reason, anytime it's a really cool documentary, people can't resist turning documentaries into narrative feature films. But luckily, this movie is considerably better than The Walk. But if you're unfamiliar with the premise for this flick, here is the official description from Wikipedia. Next Goal Wins is a 2023 American biographical sports comedy drama film directed by Taika Waititi, who co-wrote the screenplay with Ian Morris. It's based on the 2014 documentary of the same name by Mike Brett and Steve Jameson about Dutch-American coach Thomas Rongen's effort to lead the American Samoa national football team, considered one of the weakest football teams in the world, to qualification for the 2014 FIFA World Cup. The film stars Michael Fassbender as Rongen alongside Oscar Kitely, Kai Mana, David Fain, Rachel House, Beulah Koole, Will Arnett, and Elizabeth Moss. Next Goal Wins premiered at the 2023 Toronto International Film Festival prior to its theatrical release of today, November 17th, 2023. And the story itself is about Dutch-American football coach Thomas Rongen as he faces the option of being fired or accepting an almost impossible task to convert the American Samoa national team, considered one of the weakest football teams in the world, into an elite squad. The storyline also includes Fa Afafine player Jaya Saula, who was the first transgender player ever to compete in a World Cup game. And they're not exaggerating when they describe this team as the worst team in the world. They open the movie with a famous game where they're playing Australia, and they lose 31-0, which at least at that time was a world record in terms of point disparity. And basically, Michael Fassbender's character has been recruited to this team, and all they really want is to score one goal. They've got very modest, realistic expectations. And the biggest challenge for Michael Fassbender as a coach is trying to figure out how to not make the players adapt to his way of playing soccer or football. I'm from America. I played 12 years of soccer. It's very hard to start calling it football, because when I think of football, I think of quite a different sport. So I'm going to call it soccer for the rest of this video, because this is an American video from an American soccer player, even though I might be the worst soccer player ever produced by the United States. But the big challenge for Michael Fassbender's character is that he's one of those players where he gets no joy out of soccer. He's completely psycho, he's completely dedicated, he's completely aggressive, he's consumed by the game, he's fascinated by the game, but he doesn't really enjoy the game. Whereas the people of American Samoa, their culture is deeply spiritual, but it's also kind of happy-go-lucky, very laid back, just everybody's very chill, very happy in general. And so you have a true culture clash. But what was surprising about the movie was that the culture clash and the comedy that stems from it was actually the least satisfying part of the movie. In a weird way, It almost feels like Taika Waititi is losing his funny bone, or perhaps he's just spreading himself too thin. He's writing multiple screenplays right now. He's got multiple films on deck. And maybe creatively, his energy is getting somewhat exhausted. But the part of the movie that works is the inspirational kind of team spirit, just classic kind of sports format, which actually came as a big surprise for me. And whether you love soccer or baseball or ice hockey or basketball or football or whatever the case might be, we all have our favorite sports movies. I mean, for me, The Bad News Bears is probably the best when it comes to bringing the comedy. But Slapshot is absolutely incredible as well. I like North Dallas 40. I mean, there are a lot of good sports movies out there. It's definitely a genre unto itself. I even kind of divided into smaller categories. You've got your solo sports movies like boxing. I mean, I feel like boxing is almost its own genre. And then you have your team sports movies. And I don't know if Next Goal Wins is strong enough to really succeed as an inspirational sports movie, but who knows? I mean, the whole world, this is the most popular sport in the world. This is the kind of movie that's going to play very well on airplanes for years to come. But if you place it side by side with Taika Waititi's best movies, I don't think it compares very favorably. It actually might be one of his weakest feature films. I mean, I think Jojo Rabbit is a better movie. Thor Love and Thunder is probably worse. I think Thor Ragnarok is definitely better. And he's obviously directed a lot of TV, but then you also have his fake documentary, the original feature film for What We Do in the Shadows. He even did the short film for What We Do in the Shadows before it became a movie, before it became a TV show. But anyway, he's one of the creators of that. And Eagle vs. Shark, his very first feature film, is absolutely fucking hysterical. And Two Cars, One Night, his Oscar-nominated short from 2003, that's absolutely fantastic and well worth hunting down. But as much fun as it might be getting immersed in American Samoa culture, it's one of those cultures where it's a very small island, limited talent pool for the team, limited talent pool for the coaching and the staff and that sort of thing. And everybody on the team is working like 3 or 4 extra jobs just to support their role on the team, which is actually a very consistent plot device going all the way back to Taika Waititi's film Boy. But the sad reality is a lot of the comedy feels kind of lazy and obvious, and case in point would be Taika Waititi's cameo as one of the priests on this island, and he's just kind of hamming it up, and it's a little over the top, and it's almost like you're juggling enough balls, you got enough spinning plates on sticks. Maybe hire somebody else to play this role, because it's not necessarily like a great role, but at least you could have brought in a really cool character actor from anywhere in the Polynesian islands. And unless Taika Waititi is ready to kind of step up to the plate and really just crush that role like he did in Boy, he's amazing in Boy. But anything less than that just kind of feels like a distraction. But the lazy comedy doesn't stop there. And the most consistently lazy running gag throughout the movie is just referring to Michael Fassbender as white. And that's the end of the joke. Like, they never say, like, oh, he's white, therefore this, or this happened because he's white. They just say he's white. It's like, all right, I get it. Michael Fassbender, he's a pale guy, blonde hair. The rest of you are slightly darker in skin tone. But I love racial humor against white people when it's delivered by a master comedian. Like, take Richard Pryor, Eddie Murphy, Chris Rock, and Dave Chappelle. I grew up watching all their comedy specials. They're some of the funniest human beings who ever lived, and they all have fantastic jokes at white people's expense, where I am laughing just as hard as everybody else in the audience, because they're set up well and they're delivered well and they're just incredibly well written, incredibly well performed. Like, bring on all the white jokes that you could ever hope to tell, and I will not complain. But you can't be lazy and say, oh, well, he's white and that's the end of the story. Like, that's fucking garbage. I'm sorry. And if you're watching a lighthearted, comedic, sports movie, you got to bring it when it comes to the comedy. That said, the sports side was giving me chills, and that came as a huge surprise. There are a couple scenes where the team's coming together, where they're recruiting some ex-players or, climbing mountains together, whatever the case may be, but having these little breakthroughs where you can tell they're making progress. And I was like, what the fuck's going on? I could feel chills going up my back. I was like, I'm getting inspired by and moved by the sports drama unfolding before me, and I was not anticipating that at all. I thought the whole movie would be kind of tongue-in-cheek, kind of jokey, and almost like a Happy Gilmore movie where you're not meant to take any of it particularly seriously. And there's a locker room scene. I mean, every sports movie has a great locker room scene where somebody gives an inspirational speech. Every sports show, every sports movie, that is probably the most enduring trope of the sport genre. But goddamn, the locker room scene in this, I won't say which one, it's incredibly moving when you see the team coming together and they start to sing together. I was like, this is pure magic. And it's just a shame that the whole movie is not. If the whole movie were as moving as that, they could just leave the jokes aside and just have it be an inspirational tale. But I remain dubious that this movie is going to catch on. It's just not quite strong enough to really break through during a very crowded season where at this time of year, you have so many specialty films, so many indie films, so many foreign films. They're all competing for awards. And when you're going up against movies like Alexander Payne's The Holdovers or Poor Things from director Yorgos Lanthimos, it's very easy to get kind of just consumed by this tidal wave of all these prestigious, glamorous movies. I mean, even for Michael Fassbender's fans, this is not the best Michael Fassbender movie of the season. I would strongly recommend people check out David Fincher's The Killer. I had a few issues with the ending, but otherwise, The Killer's fucking incredible. So it's like Michael Fassbender, he'd been kind of away for a long time, but then he came back with this 1-2 punch, and sadly, it's just the weaker of the two punches. But we also have Will Arnett in here, Elizabeth Moss. They're pretty good, but like Will Arnett, he's got his style of comedy that is very writing dependent. He can't just just act like Will Arnett and expect all the jokes to fly. And I would say his material it's okay, but not exceptional. Probably the funniest role in the movie is that played by Oscar Kitely. He's kind of basically like the most important guy on the island who's running the soccer program as well as like 10 other businesses. But he is absolutely hilarious from start to finish. His accent's incredible, but it's a great comedic performance, and it's very warm, very lovable. Like everybody's gonna fall in love with this character, Tavita. But the most memorable performance in this movie is that by actress Kai Mana, who plays the transgender athlete Jaya. I'm not quite sure how to say that name accurately, but her performance is absolutely amazing. And she's in this weird position where she's transitioning and she's taking hormones, which the hormones make her a little slower and not quite as good on the team, but she's got other goals apart from being a soccer player. But her bonding scenes and like her initial friction with and then her initial friendship with the character played by Michael Fassbender, that's definitely the heart and soul of the movie, and just watching how she takes on more of like a leadership role in the team as the team slowly gets better and better. And I think this movie will continue to have a good reputation as one of the better examples of how to incorporate a transgender character into your movie without making it the core of the movie. It doesn't eclipse the rest of the movie, but it's a key part of the movie, and also it just helps that the character is based on real life history, and so I think they just were kind of plucking directly from the headlines and just feeding it right into the movie. But yes, she did a damn good job. But this is definitely one of those movies that's very tough to review. I feel like movies that are pretty good or kind of bad are always the most challenging to review. Like movies that are terrible or amazing are very easy to review. But it's hard to make a full-throated recommendation for this. I think probably people should, hopefully they'll have better luck in finding the original documentary than I had. I'm determined to watch that goddamn documentary because the trailer looks absolutely incredible. But whether or not I can recommend, I feel like if you really love sports movies, give it a go. If you really love the actors involved, give it a go. Or if you're a Taika Waititi super fan. But I don't think this is the movie that's going to allow Taika Waititi to make a full-blown comeback, at least when it comes to opening up the doors to those giant opportunities to do things like a live-action Akira. I wish he would just do original films. And obviously, it's very hard to do blockbuster original movies because there's so much money on the line. People get very nervous and they get very fearful. But I hope he'll continue to play around with fantasy and sci-fi and superheroes and all those cool genres. But I hope he'll do so in an original fashion because I feel like he's got the creativity. But my advice to Taika would be stop deliberately baiting fans into hating you and your movies. I remember before Thor: Love and Thunder came out, he was joking about how many people were going to hate his interpretation of the material, and it's like, guess what? A lot of people did, and now they've turned against him. And then he was also talking in an interview recently about how people are going to hate his Star Wars movie if he ever gets a chance to actually make it. It's like the Star Wars fan base is divided and tribal enough as it is. Maybe don't add fuel to the flame. Just say, I'm going to make the best goddamn Star Wars movie that you've ever seen, and everybody's going to love it. Like, that is a way to get people on board. Say I want to make a Star Wars movie that's going to appeal to new fans and old fans and everything in between. But call me old-fashioned. I don't think there was any period in movie history where movies were doing really well, where directors were making public pronouncements about how much the public was going to hate them or their movies. Like, it's showmanship. It's show business. Invite people to a great show and try to entertain them right down to their taste buds, and you'll enjoy more opportunities. But who knows, maybe I'm just foolish enough and naive enough to think that movies should be something that people enjoy and that you invite people to participate in as a group. But I think at this point I'm starting to ramble, and I still got a bunch of other videos that I want to make this weekend before I skedaddle for the Thanksgiving holiday. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. So if you enjoyed this review, please consider liking the video, subscribing to the channel, hitting that notification bell, leaving a comment in the comments below. But I hope everybody has a great weekend, great Thanksgiving holiday, but more importantly, as always, onwards and upwards.